I trusted my cousin with my life, never knowing she was plotting to take everything I had. In the end, I lost more than just my possessions. I lost a part of myself I'll never get back. My name is Mia, and this is the story of how my life fell apart, because my cousin, someone I considered my closest ally, turned out to be the one person who destroyed everything I had: my trust, my possessions, and my sense of security. It all started when I was at my lowest. Losing my parents had been devastating, and it left a hole in my heart that nothing seemed capable of filling. For the longest time, I thought I was strong enough to go through it on my own. But grief is a heavy weight that no one can bear alone. I had to leave the city I had spent most of my life in, and I found myself standing in front of the house my parents had left me, a place that now felt like a tomb. That's when Clara reached out. I hadn't heard from her in years, and when I got the message, I was surprised. It was short but sincere. "Hey Mia, I heard about your parents. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know we haven't been in touch, but I'd really like to help you through this. You don't have to go through it alone." At first it seemed like a sweet gesture, one that came from the heart. But I was too broken to see that it was a thinly veiled attempt to get close, to worm her way into my life once again. I grew up with Clara, and we were close in the way cousins can be when you're young. We shared secrets, laughed at the same jokes, and supported each other through school, though she always had a way of making me feel less than her. She was popular, beautiful, outgoing, everything I wasn't. I had always admired her from a distance, even if I resented her at times. But that's what family does. They show you both sides. At least, that's what I thought when I moved back to the house after the funeral. I didn't want to burden anyone, but Clara pushed so hard, saying she had the space and the time. "I'll be there for you," she kept repeating. "You need to focus on healing, not on taking care of everything." In my fragile state, I agreed. It seemed like the best thing to do at the time. When I arrived at her place, I was already overwhelmed by the wave of grief, exhaustion, and uncertainty that had consumed me. Clara welcomed me with open arms. It felt like a comfort I hadn't had in so long, but I didn't realize then that I had just walked into a trap, and the kindness I thought I was receiving was nothing more than a facade. She constantly checked in on me, offering to help with my parents' estate, my finances, and my emotional well-being. "You don't have to do any of this by yourself, Mia," she'd say, sitting across from me with a reassuring smile. "I'm your family. I'll make sure you're okay." But that's where it began. She started asking questions about my savings, about the inheritance I had been left. She was subtle at first, making it seem like casual conversation. "So, do you have everything set with the bank?" she'd ask over coffee. "You know, you should make sure the paperwork is in order. It's not easy dealing with all of this." Didn't think much of it at first, but those little questions started to become more frequent, more pointed, and slowly the manipulation began. She would come to my house unannounced, always at the most inconvenient times, and offer to help me with things. It became clear she was trying to gain control over every little aspect of my life. One day, I returned home after an errand, and was greeted by her sitting in my living room, with my important documents spread across the coffee table. "I was just going through everything for you, Mia," she said, her eyes shining with false sincerity. "You've been so overwhelmed. I thought it'd be better if I helped you sort through all of this, you know, with the funeral costs and the house sale. You shouldn't have to do all of this on your own." At first I didn't suspect anything. It seemed logical. Why would she do anything wrong? She was family, after all. But then came the moment that made me question everything. She kept asking about my bank accounts, the checks I had received, and whether I had been taking care of the legal paperwork. The more she pressed, the more I began to feel uneasy. My thoughts started racing. Was I being paranoid, or was she really trying to gain access to everything I owned? The subtlety of her actions was what made it so dangerous. She was always there, just enough to appear helpful, but not enough to be suspicious. She would check in on me constantly, pretending to be concerned about my emotional state, all while gradually taking more and more control over my personal affairs. It wasn't until I started settling in, still raw from the loss of my parents, that I began to notice the cracks in Clara's facade. At first, I had dismissed the small signs, little things that didn't seem to add up, but as time passed, I began to question whether I was simply being paranoid, or if something was wrong. Clara's presence in my life started to become overwhelming. At first it was easy to dismiss. After all, she was trying to help, right? She'd show up uninvited, bring coffee, and suggest we hang out or go out for walks, something I usually enjoyed. But soon, her help started feeling more like an invasion. She would show up at the most inconvenient times, when I was trying to clean or simply process my grief alone. And while I was grateful for her support, something about it began to feel forced. I noticed it one evening when I returned home from an appointment at the bank. I had spent hours going through paperwork, trying to get my parents' estate in order, something that felt impossible to do on my own when I got back. Clara was sitting at my kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, surrounded by stacks of documents. She had clearly been through all my things again. "You've got to organize this better, Mia," she said, her voice light but firm, as if she were the one in charge. "You can't just leave it all over the place like this. What if something important gets lost?" I didn't know what to say. I felt embarrassed, as if I had been doing something wrong. I know. I'm still getting used to everything. I'm not ready to go through it all." I was exhausted, emotionally drained. Clara stood up, walked over, and gently rearranged the papers in front of me. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll take care of it. I know how to manage this stuff better. I've been dealing with things like this for years." She didn't ask for permission. She didn't even give me a choice. I sat there in stunned silence, unable to find my voice. At that moment, I felt like I was losing control of everything: my grief, my parents' belongings, my very life, and Clara was the one taking it from me. But I wasn't sure if I should be grateful or suspicious. The next day I discovered something odd. My purse, which I always kept locked in my room, had been rummaged through. It wasn't that anything was missing, at least not that I could tell, but the way the contents had been rearranged bothered me. My wallet was no longer where I had left it, and some of the cards had been moved around. I brushed it off as an oversight, convincing myself I was just being too sensitive. After all, I had given Clara a spare key to my place so she could help with the house. But as I looked around, I couldn't help but notice that more and more of my personal things had been touch books, photos, even the jewelry I had left on a dresser. The real shock came when I noticed that small sums of money had started disappearing from my bank account. It wasn't a huge amount at first, just a few hundred here and there, but it wasn't until I saw a series of unexplained withdrawals that I realized something was wrong. When I confronted Clara, she gave me the same wide-eyed, innocent look she always did when I questioned her. "Mia, you're being paranoid," she said, her voice laced with sweetness, but there was an edge to it. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe it's just your bank messing up. You know how they are with those things. Don't let it bother you." But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that her words didn't add up. Clara had always been the one to manage her finances meticulously. She had a way of keeping track of everything, down to the last penny. The fact that she was now acting so dismissive and unbothered only made me more suspicious. I started pulling up old bank statements, checking for discrepancies. And that's when I saw the truth: several large sums had been transferred from my account into one I didn't recognize. When I confronted her again, I was shaking with anger. "Clara, this isn't just some mistake. You've been taking my money. Why?" She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze avoiding mine. "Mia, I didn't want to worry you. You were going through so much. I thought you wouldn't notice." Her voice was dripping with feigned concern. "I've been helping with your finances, trying to make sure everything stays in order." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat was tight with the realization of what had been happening. Clara wasn't just helping me, she was exploiting my grief to take whatever she could. I took a deep breath, my voice barely a whisper. "How could you do this to me, to my family?" She looked at me with a cold, empty gaze. "Mia, I was trying to make sure you didn't end up like your parents, alone, broke, with nothing to fall back on. You should be thanking me for keeping you afloat. You never would have made it through all of this without me." Her words stung more than the betrayal itself. She didn't feel guilty. She was convinced that she was in the right. It was as if she had convinced herself that she was doing me a favor by stealing from me, but I couldn't let it go. I couldn't ignore the fact that she was taking more than just my money. She was taking the last piece of my family, my heritage, the items my parents had left behind. Over the next few days, I began noticing more things gone from my house. First, it was the small stuff: a ring my grandmother had given me, some old books, an antique lamp my father had bought for my mother years ago. Then, I realized bigger things were disappearing: my parents' wedding photos, the personal letters they had written to each other, the family heirlooms I had always treasured. I checked my safe and found that the cash I had been keeping there was gone. The jewelry my mother had passed down to Mitha, Only things I had left to remember. Her body was missing. And when I asked Clara about it, her response was chilling. "Mia, you don't need those things anymore. You're better off without them," she said, as if she were speaking about junk. "They're just old things. You need to move on." It was as if she had systematically removed every trace of my parents from my life. And worse, she had convinced herself that she was helping me in doing so. The thought of it made my blood run cold. Clara wasn't just stealing possessions. She was erasing memories. I had been blind. How could I have let it go on for so long? I had trusted her to help me through one of the most difficult times in my life. But she wasn't there for me. She was there for herself. Every helpful act was just a means to an end. A way to gain access to what was mine. I had hoped that after confronting Clara, things would go back to normal, but the opposite happened. The more I tried to ignore the mounting evidence, the more I realized that Clara's betrayal wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, one that had been carefully planned and executed over months. The worst part, she had made me doubt myself, to the point where I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or if something truly insidious was going on. It wasn't long before the financial irregularities began to escalate. I started to check the transfer records more closely. The money wasn't just being withdrawn in small, easily dismissible amounts anymore. It was becoming more frequent, and the sums were getting larger. I could no longer ignore the fact that Clara was draining my savings. The worst part was that she had managed to convince me that she was doing it for my own good. I was still living at Clara's house, trying to get my life back on track. The guilt I felt for questioning her every move gnawed at me. She would act so concerned, so selfless. She would check in with me constantly, bringing up conversations about how difficult it must be for me to manage the estate, how I couldn't possibly be expected to keep track of everything with the grief I was dealing with. I would find her sitting in front of my computer, sifting through my emails and messages, offering to take over any tasks I wasn't up for. At first, I just let it go. I thought I was too weak to handle everything on my own. But after a while, I realized something was terribly off. Clara had taken complete control over everything in my life, my finances, my house, even my emotional well-being. She wasn't just trying to help. She was slowly, insidiously taking over. It was a Friday night when the final straw came. I had returned from an afternoon out, a rare moment where I had tried to take care of myself, even if it was just for a few hours. As I walked into the living room, I noticed that Clara wasn't in the house. But there was a strange feeling in the air, like something was out of place. I immediately went to check the security cameras on my phone, just to make sure everything was fine. The footage made my stomach turn. There in the video was Clara. She had gone into my room, my private space, and started going through my drawers. I watched, frozen, as she rummaged through my things, pulling out my mother's jewelry box. A box full of old letters my parents had written to one another. And most disturbingly, the envelope that held my father's will. She didn't seem to care about privacy, or the boundaries I had set. She was going through every part of my life as if it were her right. That was the moment I knew. Clara had crossed the line from someone I thought was helping me, to someone who was stealing my life. What made it worse was that she wasn't just taking my possessions. She was taking my memories, my identity, my entire history. She was erasing my family from my life, piece by piece. I couldn't let it go any longer. I had to confront her, even if I didn't know how. I had to face the woman who was supposed to be family, who had lied, manipulated, and used me for months. The confrontation wasn't what I expected. When I confronted her about the footage, I was shaking with rage. Yet something in her expression made me pause. Clara wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't guilty. She was coldly calculating, as if she had already planned this moment. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, but there was a thinly veiled irritation beneath her words. "You must be mistaken, Mia. Why would I steal from you?" I felt my stomach churn. I saw the footage. "Clara, I know you've been taking my things. My mother's jewelry, the letters, the way I've been tracking everything. Don't lie to me." She looked at me with that familiar sweet smile, the one that made me feel like I was the unreasonable one. "AI, you need to stop overreacting. I was just going through some of your stuff to help you organize things. You're still grieving, and I've been trying to help you." "Help me," I snapped. Help me. You're stealing from me, Clara. I've seen the transfers. You've been draining my account. You've been taking everything, my memories, my family's things. What the hell is wrong with you? Her expression didn't change. Mia, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I was just trying to make sure you didn't end up like your parents, penniless, alone, struggling. You're better off. Without those things, they're just objects. You should be focusing on your future, not clinging to the past. I was speechless. She was trying to justify her actions, trying to make it sound like everything she had done was for my benefit. It was the same manipulative tactic she had used all along, making me feel like I was crazy for even questioning her. She was so calm, so sure of herself. It was as if she truly believed that what she was doing was somehow justified. I can't believe you, I said, my voice trembling with fury. I trusted you, Clara. I trusted you with everything, my life, my grief, my memories, and you've been taking it all, like it was your right. She stepped closer to me, her eyes softening just a bit, but her voice remained cold and indifferent. You don't understand, Mia. I was just doing what had to be done. You're too emotional to handle this. I've been trying to help you to keep things in order. If I didn't step in, you would have lost everything. I was saving you from yourself. That was when I realized that she wasn't going to stop. She didn't feel guilty because she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. In her mind, she was the hero of this twisted story, and I was the one who had to be saved. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I could barely look at Clara without feeling a surge of anger and disgust. Yet, she continued to play her role as the doting cousin, checking on me, offering help, never acknowledging the destruction she had caused. She would act like nothing had changed, as if I had no reason to be upset. And I found myself questioning whether I was just being unreasonable. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. Clara's control over my life was suffocating, and it was only getting worse. I had to find a way to break free from her grip, no matter how difficult it might be. The problem was, Clara was no longer just my cousin. She was a force in my life that I had to get rid of, or else I would lose everything I had left of my parents. I started making plans to cut ties with her. It was going to be hard. She had wormed her way into every aspect of my life, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get out from under her control. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this, not with someone who had stolen my past and was trying to steal my future. The days after my confrontation with Clara were a haze of anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I knew I couldn't keep living in this suffocating bubble any longer. But what terrified me the most was that Clara was no longer just a cousin to me. She had become a manipulative force in my life, controlling everything I touched. She had managed to infiltrate every part of my world, from my finances to my emotions, and now she was stealing what was left of my past. I couldn't let this continue, but part of me was terrified of what would happen if I cut her off. How would I get her out of my life for good? She had wormed her way into every crevice of my world, and every time I tried to challenge her, I ended up feeling like I was the one who was unreasonable. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about control, about taking back what she had slowly and methodically stripped from me, my trust, my security, my family. The breaking point came one afternoon, when Clara told me that she had taken care of selling the house. I had been dreading it, but at the same time, I couldn't believe it was happening. The house, my childhood home, the place where my parents had raised me, was gone. The walls were filled with memories, echoes of laughter, family dinners, quiet nights. And now it was gone, sold without even asking me. I sold it, Mia, Clara said one afternoon, as if she were discussing something trivial. She was sitting at the dining table, her phone in hand, her usual calm demeanor never wavering. It was just too much for you to deal with. I made sure to get a good price for it. You'll be much better off. My blood ran cold. What do you mean you sold it? Clara, you can't just sell the house without talking to me about it first. It's my inheritance, my home. You had no right to MIA. You're being emotional. She cut me off, her voice soft and unbothered. You weren't going to do anything with it. You don't even want to live in it. It's just a burden to you. I've been taking care of everything for you. I'm trying to help. Her words felt like a slap to my face. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about her making decisions for me, decisions that I hadn't asked for, that I hadn't wanted. Clara was right. I wasn't in a place to deal with the house. But that didn't mean I wanted her to take control and make those decisions. For me, she had no right. You didn't help me, Clara, I said, my voice trembling with anger and betrayal. You took everything from me. I trusted you with my life, my grief, my family's legacy. You used that trust to steal from me. You took the house, the money, the memories, everything for what? So you could play the hero, so you could save me. Her eyes flickered for a moment, a shadow passing over her face, but just as quickly, her mask of calm returned. I did what was best for you, Mia, she replied. You'll thank me one day. I'm saving you from making a mess of your life. All of this, everything's too much for you. You need someone who can make the hard decisions for you. I could feel my chest tightening with rage. The words she said were so cold, so detached from any kind of real empathy, that it was as if I was talking to a stranger instead of my own family. There was no remorse in her voice, no understanding of how deeply she had hurt me. She truly believed that everything she did was for my benefit. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about her need to control me, to control everything. She was a puppet master, and I was the one who had been unknowingly dancing to her strings. I don't need you to save me, Clara, I said, my voice steady now, despite the storm of emotion swirling inside me. I don't need your help. I don't need you to make decisions for me. You crossed a line, and now I can't even look at you the same way anymore. She looked at me with a mix of disbelief and something that resembled pity. Mia, you're overreacting, she said, her voice soft, almost condescending. I'm doing all of this because I love you. You don't understand what's good for you right now, but you will. The calm in her voice made me want to scream. She wasn't just dismissing me, she was trying to manipulate me into thinking that I was the one who was wrong. She was gaslighting me, trying to convince me that everything she had done was justified, that I was simply too weak and too emotional to see it. But I was done. In that moment, I made a decision. I had to cut her out of my life for good. I couldn't allow her to continue her cruel, selfish manipulation. I had to take back control of my own life, and that meant making the hardest decision I had ever faced. Clara, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. I don't want you in my life anymore. You've taken enough. You've hurt me enough. I can't keep letting you do this to me. Her face went pale for the briefest of moments, before her usual mask of calm returned. You can't be serious, she said, as if she couldn't comprehend the possibility of me turning my back on her. Mia, you're making a mistake. You need me. You'll regret this. But I didn't regret it. I was done. I had spent so long questioning myself, doubting my own judgment, wondering if I was imagining things. But I had finally realized the truth. Clara wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't a caring cousin. She was a thief of, not just my possessions, but my trust, my memories, my entire future. I'm not making a mistake, I said firmly. I've had enough. I want you out of my life. The silence between us was thick with tension. Clara stood there, staring at me with disbelief in her eyes. But I could see something else there to endure, perhaps even a sense of betrayal, though I knew it wasn't the same kind. I felt she was angry because she had been exposed, because she had lost control over me. She wasn't angry about what she had done. She was angry that I had finally woken up. I'll leave, she said, her voice cold. But you'll regret this. You'll see. I watched her gather her things, leaving my life as easily as she had entered it. The entire time, she never once apologized, never once acknowledged the hurt she had caused. She left without a second thought, as if everything she had done was completely justified in her mind. The hardest part wasn't cutting Clara off, it was realizing that the person I had trusted the most was the one who had hurt me the most. Family wasn't supposed to be this way. They weren't supposed to take everything from you and leave you with nothing but empty promises and broken trust. But Clara had done just that. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I had finally freed myself from the weight of her manipulation, but it came at a cost. I had lost a cousin, a piece of my past, and a sense of security I would never get back. But I knew one thing for sure, would never let anyone take my life from me again. I had to rebuild, piece by piece, from the ruins she had left behind. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way forward, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could start again. Trust is something that must be earned, and once broken, it is almost impossible to repair. No one should ever be allowed to control your life, your memories, or your heart. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that set you free. If you've ever been betrayed by someone close to you, share your story in the comments. Let's talk about how you took back control and rebuilt your life. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more real-life stories about trust, betrayal, and the lessons we learned the hard way.